Now, EFDD David Coburn, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bonjour, Monsieur Moscovici. For those outside this room who may not be aware, you're not only the EU Commissioner for Tax, but as a former, may I say, extremely distinguished French Finance Minister, you have previously been responsible for national tax policy. And as this committee is here to discuss tax, I'm sure you can share with us your experience. What reaction do you think a French finance minister would have if a third country, say for example the United States of America, were to insist that as part of a trade deal, France should have higher taxes and should submit its tax policy to a third-party arbiter that had the power to fine France for any breach? I think everyone would think the answer pretty obvious. No country could possibly sign such a deal. No country ever has. And yet the EU expects the UK to submit itself to such a humiliation. Barnier was told on Friday that, paraphrase paragraph 12 of the Council guidelines, I have them here, the aim of the future trade deal should be to prevent unfair competitive advantage that the UK could enjoy through undercutting of levels of protection with respect to, amongst other things, tax, and requiring a combination of substantive rules aligned with EU standards, mechanisms to ensure enforcement, and autonomous remedies. If UK tax policy is to be forever determined by a third-party arbiter with the power to fine the UK, that would be taxation without representation, sir. Wars have started over such tyrannies. Is the Commission trying to spark a civil unrest in the UK, or merely trying to make a deal with the UK absolutely impossible? Thank you.
Je crains de devoir faire une réponse.
Well, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to be brief, because your question does fall outside the scope of our discussion today. As you know, Michel Barnier, the negotiator on behalf of the Commission, who's negotiating on behalf of the 27 member states on the basis of defined principles that the European Council has confirmed, what we want to do clearly is conclude a good, amicable agreement with the UK, which will allow us to maintain close relations, because even if the UK is ultimately choosing to leave the EU, it will still be a European country. No one is going to call into question its sovereignty, but there'll have to be cooperation agreements amongst ourselves, and that's what we will do. And let me just say that in connection with discussions under my remit, I'm actually quite delighted about the cooperation that we've had with the UK governments for the last 5 years, since I've been dealing with this portfolio, first of all as Minister of Finance, now as Commissioner. And can I point out that the UK was amongst the first to support the OECD BEPS approach. And the UK, together with 4 other finance ministers, the so-called large EU countries with the largest economies, they were amongst the first to support the temporary tax that the Commission proposed. So we will continue to cooperate with our UK friends, and I'm quite sure that whatever happens in the future, we'll continue to be close on these subjects. I absolutely don't believe that the UK is going to become a tax haven. It's going to be sovereign. It will be able to adopt the strategy it sees fit, but it will remain a large country, a member of the G20, G7, cooperating with its European partners.